Camila Herrera was 32 years old and had a face that looked older than her birth certificate suggested. The deep circles under his eyes didn't just come from physical exhaustion, they came from the silences he had learned to swallow since life took his sister from him and gave him two girls to raise. He lived at the end of a dusty alley on the outskirts of Mexico City in a shack with thin wooden walls and a zinc roof, which shook when a truck passed by. There, he had been living with Sofia and Lucia, his 7- and 9-year-old nieces, since the night he received the call. Mariana, his older sister, had been hit by a speeding car, and the driver fled without looking back. Camila was never the same again. He buried his sister with the little he had, and without thinking twice, took the girls as his daughters. There was no time for mourning, just to survive. Before the story continues, please like the video. This helps spread stories like this to more people who need inspiration. That Tuesday, Camila woke up at 4:30 a.m., as she always did. It was still dark, and the only sound was the dripping of water into the bucket that caught the leaking kitchen drain. She made coffee with boiled water in the aluminum kettle, fried 2 eggs, and divided a stale loaf of bread into 3 equal parts. While she combed the girls' hair, patiently braiding Sofia's unruly strands and putting on the blue bow that Lucia loved so much, she mentally replayed the day's route, taking the girls to school, taking 3 buses to Polanco, cleaning her boss's new apartment, and returning in time to see the 2 of them go to sleep. It was exhausting, but Camila never complained. Deep down, she felt that she owed it to her sister, and to herself too. Because despite everything, she never stopped believing that dignity did not depend on luxury, but on choice. Camila arrived at the building's lobby at 7:12 a.m. The building was a giant mirror, with a lobby so silent that you could hear her heels hitting the marble. The doorman barely looked up. He handed over his badge with an automatic gesture and went back to his cell phone. In the elevator, she adjusted her bun with hands that still smelled of coconut soap and looked at her reflection in the stainless steel. The dark circles under her eyes seemed deeper under the cold light, but her eyes remained steady. Leonardo Ramirez's apartment was on the top floor. It was her 3rd day there, and she had already memorized what she could and couldn't do. Don't touch the automatic lights, don't use the programmed coffee maker, don't touch the books on the main shelf. He was methodical, reserved, and almost never spoke. He only left notes on the counter with direct instructions, and she obeyed. She always obeyed. After all, that salary covered the rent, the gas, and sometimes even an ice cream at the end of the month. Leonardo was sitting at the glass table, reading something on his tablet, when she walked in. He didn't even lift his face. He just muttered a dry good morning, as if greeting someone out of obligation. Camila responded politely and went straight to the laundry room. The house was organized like a showroom, cold like a hospital waiting room. Nothing out of place, nothing that smelled of life. She swept, cleaned the windows, changed the sheets, did everything with the attention of someone who knows she can't make mistakes. As he put away the dishes, he noticed an upside-down picture frame on the counter. It was the only thing out of place in the entire apartment. It didn't ring. I didn't want to know, but something about that hidden image stuck in her head, as if to say that even those who seem to have it all also hide their cracks. On the way home, Camila's body seemed to weigh more than when she left. The sun was almost setting behind the buildings when she got off the last bus, crossing the walkway with aching legs and her mind spinning around the month's bills. She stopped at Dona Eloisa's little shop and bought 2 bananas and a small package of rice. That was all she had in her wallet. The owner of the bar on the corner greeted her with a discreet wave, and she responded with a light smile, the kind we give to avoid looking too tired. When she arrived at the shack, she heard laughter coming from inside. Lucia was inventing some play with hanging sheets, and Sofia was narrating as if she were a TV presenter. Camila dropped the weight of the bags into the sink, took a deep breath, and smiled. No matter how difficult the day had been, that sound was what kept everything going. After the girls' bath and an improvised dinner with rice, egg, and 2 bananas cut in half, Camila sat on the mattress against the wall and let the two of them cuddle up next to her. Sophia asked if their mother would ever come back. It was a question that came up from time to time, even after so many explanations. Camila didn't know what else to say. He just hugged the girl and responded with the only thing he could offer firmly. "She's still with us, just in a different way." Lucia, who always seemed tougher, held her aunt's hand without saying anything. Camila looked up at the tin ceiling, trying not to let the tears fall, and wondered if one day they would have something more. Not luxury, but stability, a solid ground, a room just for them, a future where girls could dream without fear. The next morning, Camila woke up before her alarm. It was still dark, and it was cold inside the house. She wrapped the girls in a blanket and made some weak tea with burnt sugar, the way Mariana used to make them when they were little. Meanwhile, she mentally reviewed what she needed to do that day. She had to talk to the school principal about the girls' uniforms, try to renegotiate the rent with Mr. Domingos, and even go to the pharmacy to see if she could buy an inhaler for less. Lucia had a cough that wouldn't go away. The routine was always this tightrope between what was necessary and what was impossible. When she left the house, locking the door with a key attached to a wire, Camila felt the whole world on her shoulders, but also a kind of peace. She knew why she was doing all this. That day, Leonardo didn't leave a note. Camila arrived, as always, on time and found the apartment completely silent. She started in the kitchen, cleaning with meticulous movements, then went to the living room, where everything seemed the same as always. Perfect, impersonal, clean to the point of being untouched, but something made her stop. On the sofa there was a used cup, and next to it a book with a handwritten dedication, "To my son, who will one day understand why I had to leave." It was a woman's handwriting. Camila didn't want to intrude on anything, but she couldn't ignore it either. She put everything back in its place and went to his room. When she entered, she came face to face with Leonardo, still in his pajamas, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring into space. She was startled. He wasn't usually there at that time, and it wasn't just his unexpected presence. There was something in the way he held his head in his hands, as if carrying a burden that no one saw. Camila hesitated for a second, still holding the cleaning cloth. She thought about leaving quietly, turning around and pretending she hadn't seen him. But something about that scene stopped her in her tracks. Leonardo looked up slowly, as if he were returning from a distant place, and for a moment he said, "Nothing." Then he murmured, almost in a whisper, "Have you ever wanted to just disappear?" Camila didn't answer right away. Her chest tightened, not because she felt close to him, but because she recognized that kind of question. It was something someone who has already crossed the line and still needs to keep going would ask. She took a deep breath, placed the cloth on the back of the chair, and calmly answered, "Every day, but the girls pull me back." Leonardo didn't seem to understand, so she added, "My nieces. I've been taking care of them since my sister died." It was the first time she had said something personal there. For the first time, he really looked at her. Leonardo said nothing. He just nodded and got up slowly, going straight to the bathroom. Camila went back to cleaning as if nothing had happened, but inside everything felt different. It was not customary to share any details of his life with anyone, especially at work. But those words escaped as if they were waiting for the right time to come out. At the end of the day, when he closed the door to his apartment, he found something he hadn't expected. A small bag on the sideboard with a handwritten label, "For Sophia and Lucia." Inside, 2 children's books, a sketchbook, and a box of colored pencils. Camila stood there, looking at it, as if it were a mirage. He had never mentioned the girls' names. I didn't remember doing it, but there they were, written carefully, as if they wanted to say a lot without saying anything. Camila didn't take the presents straight home that day. She put the bag inside her backpack and spent the whole trip thinking. On the bus, amidst the bumps and honking of the city's horns. She kept wondering what that meant. It wasn't common to receive kindnesses, and when they did come, they always came with a price. But here, it felt different. It was as if, for a moment, someone had seen the world that existed beyond the uniform and the tasks performed in silence. When she arrived, the girls were playing with pot lids, and a stray dog insisted on visiting the yard. Camila took the bag out of her backpack without saying anything and handed it to them. Their eyes lit up as if they had received a treasure. Lucia hugged the notebook as if she were holding a secret, and Sophia immediately picked up her favorite blue pencil. "Where did this come from, Auntie?" she asked. Camila simply replied, "From an unexpected place." In the following days, Leonardo returned to his usual silence, but something had changed. The notes became less cold, his gaze more attentive, and one rainy day he appeared in the kitchen offering Camila an umbrella to take home. It was strange at first. She thanked him but returned it the next day, afraid that it would create some invisible debt. Even so, the small gestures continued. One day there was fresh bread in the kitchen, the next a carton of milk with a post-it note for the girls. Camila never knew what motivated that change, but she didn't want to romanticize it either. She knew what it was like to be tested, observed, mistaken for something she wasn't. Still, she couldn't deny it. There was a new care there, something that, however small, warmed her, like an old blanket on a cold night. Not pretty, but it worked. It was on a Friday that everything really started to change. Camila had just finished cleaning the porch, and as she walked through the living room, she heard Leonardo on the phone, with the office door ajar. His voice wasn't the same as usual. It wasn't firm or restrained. It was shaky, full of tension. "It's not about contracts, it's about conscience. I can't keep pretending I don't know." Camila tried to move away, but the words reached him. "He was on my team. I signed the documents. I covered it up without knowing." The sentence kept hammering in her mind for the rest of the day. When he left the office, he pretended not to have noticed her presence, as if nothing had happened. But Camila already knew. There was something there that went beyond what the eyes could see, and she had learned from a very young age to smell tragedy before it actually arrived. On the way home, the world seemed noisier than usual. The sound of cars, voices, horns, everything seemed to be shouting around her. At home, while the girls were drawing on the floor, Camila couldn't hide her uneasiness. She sat on the doorstep and let her gaze wander out onto the dimly lit street. Leonardo's conversation kept coming back to her like an off-key song. She didn't want to imagine the worst, but she also knew that when life starts offering kindness out of nowhere, it's good to pay attention. She had learned this from Mariana, who always said, "Too much kindness can hide a deep hole." And even without proof, Camila was already beginning to build an uncomfortable narrative within herself, a doubt that was silently eating away at her. What if all of that recent care, had a reason other than affection? The following Monday, Leonardo was different, less tidy, less in control. His dress shirt still had wrinkles from the hanger, but his face looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. When Camila arrived, he was in the kitchen, with a folder open on the table and several sheets of paper scattered around. When he saw her, he tried to hide the papers with a hurried gesture, but she pretended not to notice. He asked, without looking at her, "Do you have some time after work?" Camila found it strange. They had never talked more than necessary. "It could be," she replied cautiously. She finished her task with her head full of scenarios. She imagined everything from being fired to some strange personal request. She had experienced things like that in other jobs, but she also knew that running away was not an option. Confronting had been part of her life for a long time. When they finally sat down, he pushed an envelope toward her. Camila looked at it, then back at him. Leonardo took a deep breath and began to speak, as if pulling off a bandage too slowly. He said that years ago, an executive at his company had been involved in an accident, a hit and run. The victim died. There was an internal investigation, But at the time, he paid no attention. He signed documents, trusted the lawyers, and moved on with his life. Only recently, after reviewing the papers, did he discover the victim's name: Mariana Herrera. Camila's world stopped. She couldn't process the words. She tried to speak, but nothing would come out. Leonardo continued, visibly shaken, saying that he had reported those involved, resigned from his position, and created a fund to guarantee the girl's education and future. He said everything looking her in the eye, with a choked and sincere voice, but Camila could only think of one thing: he knew. And yet, he approached her, and yet he entered their lives. And that, at that moment, seemed unforgivable. Are you feeling the intensity of this story? Comment below what you would do in Camila's place. I'll read all the comments. Camila left the apartment without saying anything. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she didn't argue. She just walked in silence to the elevator, with the envelope still in her hand and her chest bursting inside. The weight of that revelation was so great that she didn't even feel her steps. When she got to the street, the air seemed thinner. She took the bus without paying attention to the path. Her eyes fixed on the window and her hands shaking, the image of Mariana came back like a punch. The easy smile, the protective manner, the laughter that filled any space. And now, knowing that the man who had been showing so much care was, deep down, part of the machinery that covered up her sister's death. It was cruel. Even if he hadn't run her over, even if he had tried to make amends, even if he was destroyed inside, none of that could change the fact that he knew, and it took him too long to tell. Her. At home, Camila couldn't hide her shock. The girls noticed it right away. Lucia asked if she was sick. Sophia, more direct, wanted to know if the rich man had done something wrong. Camila didn't answer either of them. She let them go play in the backyard while she locked herself in the tiny bathroom, sitting on the toilet seat, trying to understand what she was feeling. Anger, of course, disappointment, pain. But there was also something else: confusion. Because even knowing everything, a part of her recognized that Leonardo was trying to make things right, that he could have hidden it forever, could have kept his distance, but he chose to talk. And that made her even more lost. It was easier to hate when the other person was clearly the villain. But when he kneels, confesses, renounces, forgiveness becomes a choice, not a prize. And Camila didn't know if she was ready to choose. The following days were silent. Camila didn't show up for work, and Leonardo respected her absence. He didn't call, he didn't send a message, he didn't try to find out from anyone. He just waited, as if he knew that any misstep now would make everything fall apart once and for all. Camila, in turn, kept the routine with the girls as stable as possible. I would drop him off and pick him up from school, cook dinner, help with homework, but inside it was like I was walking on broken pieces. At night, when everything calmed down, he would read the envelope again, the evidence of the fund, created by Leonardo, the documents of the complaint, the letters signed with his resignation from the company. It was all there, black and white. No explicit apology, just facts, only actions. And that confused her even more, because Mariana always said, "A man who truly regrets doesn't talk, he does." On Friday of that same week, Camila decided to return to the apartment. Not on impulse, not because of longing, but because I needed to say what I felt clearly. She climbed the floors like someone climbing a mountain, heavy, firm, determined. Leonardo opened the door with a tired but not surprised look on his face, as if I already expected it. She walked in without taking her bag off her shoulder. He said it all at once, without pauses, without beating around the bush. She said she felt used, betrayed, manipulated, who didn't want favors. That forgiveness would not come quickly nor easily. But despite all this, he knew how to recognize a genuine gesture. He said he didn't know if he could look at him the same way, but that he also didn't want to carry that grudge for the rest of his life. Leonardo listened to everything in silence, with tears in his eyes. In the end, he thanked her. "You didn't try to defend yourself," He just said he would do whatever it took, even if it meant disappearing from her life for good. Camila left the apartment that day with the strange feeling that something had changed inside her. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it wasn't pure anger either. It was like when you clean a very dirty room. The air is still heavy, but you can breathe it. Over the weekend, she took the girls to a little square far away where she sold a blue cotton candy that they loved. She sat on the cement bench, watching the two of them run, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to be there just feeling, not thinking about deadlines, debts, or tasks, just being. Mariana used to say that sometimes life demands more courage from us to accept love than to endure pain. Camila never fully understood that phrase, until now. On Monday, Leonardo was no longer in the apartment. The doorman said he had moved in over the weekend, without fanfare. He left a key with her name on it in a sealed envelope. Upon opening the apartment, Camila came across something she didn't expect. The place was empty, except for a cardboard box in the middle of the room, with a letter on top. In the letter, Leonardo said he was going to live differently, away from mirrors, white walls, and spreadsheets. He said he had sold the apartment and transferred the funds to the girls' fund, who didn't know what the future held, but wanted them to have one, and that if Camila ever wanted to start over, for real, from scratch, he would be willing to learn not as a boss nor as a savior, but as someone who also needed to be saved. She read it, sat on the cold floor and cried. He cried everything he hadn't let out until then. The box left by Leonardo was not luxurious, but it was full of meaning. Inside, Camila found drawings of the girls that he had kept without her knowing, the blue ribbon that Sophia had once lost in the hallway of the building, and a small notebook where he had jotted down random phrases, reflections, questions he had never had the courage to ask. Things like, how do you teach someone to trust again? Or, does dignity fit in a small house? Camila read each page calmly. There were no excuses here, only attempts. A man trying to understand life beyond numbers, trying to deal with the fact that sometimes what destroys a person is not what they do, it's what they take to fix. For the first time, she saw Leonardo as a whole person, and not as the rich, reserved boss she had known. He was a broken man, but willing to put the pieces back together, even if they were crooked. That night, after putting the girls to bed, Camila sat on the porch of her house with her notebook in her hands. He thought about everything: his sister's death, the daily struggle, the loneliness, the moments when he almost gave up. And he also thought about how everything had changed since the day he stepped into that mirrored apartment. It was strange to admit, but Leonardo had left his mark, not just on the girls' bank accounts or school notebooks, but on the way she looked at the world, and most importantly, the way she looked at herself. For the first time, he considered that perhaps he also had the right to start over, not as as a provider, as a strong woman who can handle anything, but like Camila, only Camila. A woman who, even though she was full of scars, could still choose what came next. The following week, Camila began to move. She went to the neighborhood community center and asked about night classes. There was a nursing assistant course starting in 2 weeks. The classes were simple, but they required attendance and commitment. She didn't think twice. She left her name on the list and left with a crumpled pamphlet and a hope she hadn't felt in years. In the afternoon, she stopped by the girls' school and talked to the coordinator about scholarships for extracurricular activities. She said she wanted Lucia to take theater classes and Sophia, perhaps, to take drawing classes. The coordinator smiled, surprised. You always ask for the least. Today, you asked for what they deserve. Camila was speechless. She was beginning to understand that merit wasn't vanity. It was justice. It was teaching the girls that they could dream without having to apologize. Leonardo, meanwhile, had moved to a modest house on the outskirts of the city, a small 2-story house with an unkempt garden and a sofa inherited from an old neighbor. He traded his suit for a linen shirt and the panoramic elevator for the creaky steps of the wooden staircase. He spent his days taking care of the girls' backroom paperwork, and at night he read. He read as if searching for answers in the pages of other lives. Little by little, he discovered that there was silence that healed, and not just the silence that hides. He didn't know if Camila would come looking for him again. He didn't expect her to, but every day he left the gate unlocked as a symbolic gesture, as if to say, "There's room here if you want to come in." It wasn't about romance, nor about redemption. It was about relearning how to be a person, about living a life where guilt didn't rule everything, where there was room to plant, even if the soil still hurt. The reunion didn't happen in a grand way. There was no rain, no tight hug, no background music. It happened on a normal afternoon when Camila decided to stop by Leonardo's new house after dropping the girls off at school. She was nervous, with sweaty hands and a heavy heart. She was carrying a banana pie wrapped in a tea towel, Mariana's recipe. She knocked on the gate with 2 firm knocks. Leonardo opened it with a surprised expression, but didn't say anything. He just stepped aside and made room for her to enter. The room smelled of fresh paint and freshly brewed coffee. It was simple but cozy. Camila placed the pie on the table and said bluntly, "I didn't come to get back together. I came to talk." He nodded, pulling out 2 chairs. And there, for almost 2 hours, they talked like never before, without the past weighing too much on them, without plans, only truth. Camila talked about the course, the girls, the fears she still had. Leonardo talked about his new routine, the setbacks, the homesickness he was trying to control. And between one pause and another, something began to emerge that neither of them had named, but that was there, a possibility, not a promise, but a chance. As she left, Camila looked at the small front garden and said, without thinking much, "You can plant basil there." Leonardo smiled. "And tomatoes too." They didn't agree on anything. They didn't seal anything. But something changed in that moment. It was as if they both accepted that rebuilding didn't mean erasing the past, but choosing what to do with it. And that day, even without saying it, they both chose to continue, one step at a time, with room to make mistakes, but also to grow. And that, for someone who had already lived on the brink of collapse, was more than enough. It was a new life beginning, without fanfare. Take advantage of this moment in history and subscribe to the channel now. There are many other real and transformative stories to come. Over time, Camila's visits to Leonardo's house became more frequent, always little by little, without any obligation. Sometimes she would show up with the girls, bringing cake or asking for help with some difficult homework. Other times, he was the one who would stop by her house, bringing books for Sophia or helping Lucia set up an improvised theater with cardboard boxes. There were no labels between them, just presence. And it was this constant and respectful presence that dismantled the walls. Camila still carried scars, and Leonardo knew he couldn't rush anything. He learned to wait, to listen more than he spoke, to accept that true affection does not demand, it only offers. And in that new space, built with caution, the girls flourished. The house was no longer a temporary shelter, it was a home. It was on a simple night, while they were washing dishes together, that Camila looked at Leonardo with a serene expression and said, "You've changed." He didn't understand right. "Away," so she added, "but the most beautiful thing is that I've changed too." It was true. The nursing course was going well. She could already talk more confidently, and even her dreams seemed less distant. Leonardo smiled in a sincere, almost childish way. The sink was full of foam. The radio was playing an old song, and Lucia was singing from her room, out of tune and happy. It was all too simple, and precisely for that reason, extraordinary. That scene of 2 adults who had already been broken too much, rebuilding themselves together without rushing, without guarantees, was the most silent victory that either of them could wish for. There was no happy forever, There was today, there was now, and after everything they had been through, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. As the months went by, Camila and Leonardo made a silent decision. They merged their routines. There was no formal request, no sudden change. The girls' backpacks now had 2 addresses. Dinner, which used to be made in just one house, now alternated between stoves. Camila, who used to walk tensely through the streets of Polanco, now walked more lightly, not because life had become easy, but because she no longer had to carry everything alone. The girls felt it too. Lucia, who used to be on the defensive, began to laugh more easily. Sophia drew little houses with gardens and wrote names inside them. "This is our family now, Auntie," she said one day, pointing to the paper. Camila held back her tears because she knew that was Mariana there. Mariana, who, even absent, continued to blossom in her gestures, in her memories, in the strength that never ceased to exist. Leonardo, in turn, kept learning. He discovered that fatherhood did not come from blood, but from presence. He helped with homework, woke up early on test days, and watched school presentations with an almost foolish pride. He, who had previously avoided any emotional ties, was now the first to sit on the floor, to play house. Sometimes he made mistakes, of course. He would forget a note from school or speak too loudly without realizing it. But he would apologize. He learned to apologize. And this, for a man raised among absences, was a new world. Their house, simple, with walls yet to be painted, was noisy, full of life, with the smell of freshly cooked food and laughter in the late afternoon. Camila, at night, studied hard, determined to build her future with her own hands, and Leonardo, without realizing it, was rebuilding his, one brick at a time, with the help of those he never imagined he deserved. At the girls' school, the change was also visible. The teachers began to praise not only their academic performance, but also their attitude, joy, and confidence. Lucia, who had previously avoided exposing herself, asked to participate in a play. She was chosen for the lead role. Sophia, who had previously been shy about drawing, began to paint murals with such color that everyone noticed. One day, Camila was called to speak with the principal, who praised the girls' involvement and suggested enrolling them in a scholarship program for promising students. Camila left the meeting in shock. She, who had always fought for crumbs, now saw doors opening, not through luck but through effort, through persistence, and through the courage to make difficult choices when everything told her to give up. On the way home that day, Camila passed by a newsstand and bought an old decoration magazine. It was one of those she always flipped through and put aside, but this time he took it. Arriving home, he showed the girls. "Let's choose what our new room will be like." They jumped on the couch, pointing at colorful pillows and plush rugs. Leonardo appeared with a tray of juice and laughed at the excitement. That was it. No luxury, but enough to build, together, a space with soul. That night ended with glue, scissors, cutouts, and plans. Camila looked at everything and allowed herself to dream. No fear, no guilt, because now he understood that rebuilding his life was not about erasing the past. It was to use it as a base, like fertile land. Mariana, even absent, was this land. It was the seed of everything. And in that home, amidst magazine clippings and children's laughter, love grew, discreet, strong, true. That same week, Camila received the news that she had been accepted for an internship at the neighborhood health center. It was a simple position, with a symbolic stipend, but it meant a lot. It meant recognition, a beginning, and belonging. When she told Leonardo and the girls, they celebrated with bakery cake and cheap soda, and it felt like a great achievement. During her internship, Camila began to discover another part of herself. She cared for the elderly with kindness, listened to stories from exhausted mothers, and organized files with dedication. The head nurse, a quiet and observant man, called her one day and said, "You have a knack for this, and you have soul." Camilla left that shift feeling something she hadn't felt since she was a teenager, before everything went wrong: pride in herself. And there she understood that her worth was not measured by the tragedies she survived, but by what she chose to build from them. Meanwhile, Leonardo was adapting to a life that years before he would have called too simple. Today, he called it real. He learned to fix the shower, to choose fruit at the market, to say, "I don't know," without shame. He spent his mornings tending to the garden, where basil, tomato, and mint plants now grew. Sometimes he would sit with Lucia to read a play script, or with Sophia to watch a drawing come to life on paper. On Saturdays, he would make breakfast for everyone, and he would always get the amount of sugar wrong, but he was happy there, in that mistake too. Camilla watched him with affection, in no hurry to define what they were. She no longer needed to. They knew. And the girls, with that childlike wisdom that understands what adults complicate, already called the two of them our family, without ceremony, without explanation, just because it was. And it was. On Lucia's 10th birthday, Camilla organized a small celebration in her backyard. Balloons hung with masking tape, brigadeiro served with a spoon, simple cake with pink whipped cream. He invited his schoolmates, his teacher, and his next-door neighbor. Leonardo spent the whole day helping, inflating balloons with an old pump and getting the popcorn wrong. When the party started, Lucia was wearing a borrowed dress and the biggest smile you've ever seen. When he saw the decorated table, he ran to Camilla and hugged her tightly. "Mommy would love this, right, Auntie?" Camilla swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded, holding back her emotion. Because yes, Mariana would have loved it. I would have been happy to see that even after the pain, there was a piece of heaven there, even though it was built with sacrifice. Love resisted, and in that cramped backyard, full of children running around and music playing from an old radio, Camilla felt that everything, absolutely everything, had been worth it. Later, when the house was silent and the girls were asleep, Camilla and Leonardo sat on the porch steps, each with a glass of juice and bare feet. She looked at him and said, "There are days when I still feel very angry, you know?" Leonardo didn't look away. "Me too, but now I know what to do with it." Camilla was silent for a few seconds and added, "I didn't forgive you because you deserved it. I forgave you because I needed to breathe again." He nodded, and there, without grandiose declarations, without rehearsed gestures, they understood each other. That was it. It wasn't about forgetting. It was about living with what was, and still finding space for what could be. And in that space, the future began to build itself, day after day. That same week, Camilla received an unexpected invitation. One of the nurses at the health center had put her forward for a technical scholarship program promoted by an international NGO. The training was more advanced, and if selected, she would have access to online classes and monthly meetings with health professionals from several countries. It was something she had never considered. When she first read the email, she thought it was a mistake, but it wasn't. Her name was there, written in black and white. She showed it to Leonardo, her hands shaking. He read it in silence, then smiled with his eyes. "You were always bigger than this neighborhood, Camilla. You just needed space." She cried. She cried because, for so many years, she believed she couldn't do it. And now, even though she was afraid, she was willing to try. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She was moving toward what she had always thought was impossible. Leonardo, seeing Camilla's courage blossom, also began to allow himself to dream. Differently, he began to give short lectures on corporate ethics in schools and community centers. He shared his story with humility, talking about mistakes, reparations, and second chances. He didn't do it to redeem himself. He did it because he knew that many men like him needed to hear it from someone who had been on the other side of power. People listened. Some judged, of course, but others saw themselves there, in every sentence, in every hesitation. One day, as he was leaving one of these Conversations. A young man approached him and said, "You gave me the courage to apologize to my father." Leonardo kept it as a gift, because deep down, that's what it was, transforming pain into learning. And if, along the way, he managed to help someone make fewer mistakes than he did, it would have been worth it. Over time, Sundays became sacred. It was the only day Camila didn't work and Leonardo didn't answer calls. They developed the habit of preparing a special breakfast, laying out an old tablecloth in the backyard, and sitting down together to eat, laugh, and talk. It was simple, bread with butter, cut-up fruit, and overly sweetened coffee, but it held immense value. The girls made a point of participating in everything. Lucia made up songs for the chores, and Sophia organized the cutlery as if she were a restaurant owner. Those moments, however small, held the family together. There was no longer any fear that it would fall apart at any moment. There was structure. There was affection. There was truth. Camila would often watch it all in silence and think, "This is it, not what I dreamed of, but what saved me." It was one of those mornings that Leonardo, sitting with Lucia on his lap, said something that echoed in Camila's head for the rest of the day. "Mariana would be proud of you." It wasn't the first time he had mentioned his sister, but it was the first time she didn't feel pain when she heard it. She felt longing, yes, a tightness in her chest, of course, but also a peace that was hard to explain. As if somehow Mariana had made all of this happen, as if her loss had pushed her life down a path that, although full of pain, also brought redemption. Camila nodded, her eyes brimming with tears, and replied, "She always told me that I was stronger than I believed, and now she knew it was true. Not because she had endured everything alone, but because she had learned that being strong also means knowing how to ask for help, accept love, and allow others to walk beside you, even if they arrive late." Towards the end of that year, Camila was invited to tell her story at a women's circle organized by the same NGO that offered her scholarship. She sat on a simple chair with 10 other women around her, all with lives marked by different battles. When it was her turn to speak, she remained silent for a few seconds. Then she said, "I didn't come here because I won. I came because I kept going." And it was this sentence that paved the way for everything that came after. She talked about Mariana, about the girls, about the grief that became a mission, about the anger that needed to be embraced, not denied. She also spoke about Leonardo, not as a savior, but as someone who needed to learn to be human with them. At the end, one of the participants said, "You didn't just rebuild your life, you taught someone else to rebuild theirs." Camila smiled. For the first time, she felt that her story wasn't just a scar, it was a bridge. Little by little, this story began to echo in other places. Camila was invited to record a video for the NGO and then to participate in an interview on community radio. She never sought out the spotlight, but she also stopped hiding. She knew that there were other women like her carrying the world on their shoulders, believing that they were just surviving. And she wanted them to know more was possible. Not easy, not quick, but possible. Leonardo, always behind the scenes, supported her with pride and respect. He never invaded. He never used the story to justify himself. On the contrary, he always said that she was the protagonist. She was the one who had the courage. I just followed her trail. And indeed he did. With each small choice, with each necessary retreat, he showed that he had learned. Not with pretty words, but with actions that supported everything they had begun to build together. Over time, the house became more colorful. Camila hung yellow curtains in the living room, planted flowers in a painted tire in the backyard, and stuck colorful magnets on the refrigerator. Everything was simple, but full of life. The walls were filled with drawings from the girls, encouraging notes and messages exchanged between them. One day, Leonardo came home and found an envelope with his name on it on the bookshelf. Inside was a handwritten letter from Camila. She said that for a long time she thought love was something distant, unattainable, something that was not for her. But that, living with him, with the girls, with that daily life built on small gestures, she began to understand that true love is silent, patient, and above all, possible. Leonardo read the letter more than once before putting it away among the books. He didn't respond with words. He simply made dinner that night, cleaned the kitchen, and prepared coffee the next day. And that, for Camila, was enough. On a sunny Saturday, they decided to go to the Central Park together, something they had never done before. Camila made sandwiches, Lucia took her scripts to rehearse, and Sophia carried a backpack full of colored pencils. Leonardo took care of the towel, the fruit, the water. They spent the day under a big tree, laughing at everything, chatting in no rush to go back. At one point, Lucia pulled out one of the notebooks and asked everyone to write down one thing they wanted to remember in the future. Camila wrote that we achieved it, even when it seemed impossible. Leonardo wrote that it is possible to start over, even if you carry guilt. Sophia designed a house with 4 windows and wrote, "Our house." And Lucia wrote, "That love doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be real." Camila read all of that with her eyes full and her heart at peace. On the way home that same Saturday, the car passed through a street Camila didn't know. It was an alternative route suggested by the GPS, but fate seemed to have its own plans. There, at the intersection, she recognized from afar the old sign of an abandoned store. It was the same corner where Mariana had been run over. Camila's heart sank. She asked Leonardo to stop the car for a moment. He didn't ask why, he just turned off the engine. Camila got out, walked to the sidewalk, and stood there in silence. The place still had the same cracks, the same crooked streetlight, the same muffled noise of the city in the background. But she wasn't the same anymore. She stood there for a few minutes, breathing deeply, feeling everything she needed to feel. Then she got back in the car and said, "Let's go." It wasn't an escape, it was closure. It was as if she had finally managed to get through what had been pending for so long, with dignity, with memory, with love. In the following days, life followed its natural course. Sophia won a drawing competition at school and had her work exhibited at a cultural center. Lucia was selected to represent her class in a municipal theater performance. Camila, with her internship and study routine, received constant praise for her dedication and empathy. Leonardo began writing short chronicles, recording his memories and discoveries in a notebook that only he read. The nights continued to be simple: a shared dinner, supervised homework, an old movie on TV, but there was a consistency there, a peace that came from the routine built with effort and choice. No one there was a hero. Everyone had their traumas, their flaws, their difficult days, but they were together. And most importantly, they were whole. After so much time tearing themselves apart in silence, now there was space to exist, with truth, with affection, with hope. One Monday morning, while Camila was packing the girls' lunchboxes and Leonardo was washing the coffee cups, Lucia appeared in the middle of the kitchen with a sheet of paper in her hand. "Auntie, can I do a school project about our story?" Camila turned around, surprised. "What story?" The girl answered with the simplicity that only a child could have, "The one about how we became a family." Leonardo stopped scrubbing the cup. Camila smiled. It was a question she hadn't expected, but that, in some way, sealed everything they had experienced. She said yes, of course, that she could, and that, if she needed help, the 4 of them would write it together. The girl ran off, excited, and Camila stood there, feeling a calm emotion, different from those that explode. It was a warmth inside, a kind of gratitude that cannot be explained. That night, after the girls went to sleep, Camila opened the box where she kept Mariana's souvenirs. There were old photos, a broken chain, a note in cursive writing saying, "Everything passes, except what we build with love." Camila held that paper as if it were a hand. She missed her sister every day, but now that loss hurt differently. It wasn't a void, it was presence. Mariana was there, in the girls' faces, in the decisions she made, in the way of loving that she learned over time. Leonardo approached, sat down next to her and, without saying anything, held her hand. Camila looked at him and understood that they were exactly where they were supposed to be, not because everything had worked out, but because they decided to continue, even when everything said it was better to stop. And that, in the end, was what made it all so strong. A few days later, Camila was called to the nursing course coordination office. She sat down apprehensively, thinking that she had made a mistake, arrived too late, or forgotten some document. But to her surprise, she received the news that she had been selected as the best student in the class and that she would be sent to a partner hospital in the next cycle. The position was in high demand. Her name was chosen unanimously. Upon hearing this, Camila choked up a little. She felt like running to the girls' school, telling Leonardo, her neighbor, everyone. But she left there in silence, with a light heart and a head full of memories. She remembered the first time she thought about studying, her insecurity, her fear of failure. She also remembered the first day she looked at Leonardo and thought, maybe he sees something in me that I don't see yet. And now, little by little, she was starting to see it too. That night when she got home, she found the table set with care. Leonardo had made soup, the girls had arranged the glasses, and even placed flowers from the garden in the center of the table. Camila told her the news during dinner, and the girls screamed as if it were the final of a championship. Leonardo just smiled and said, "We always knew." Later, while they were washing the dishes together, he asked her what she wanted to do most now. Camila answered without thinking, "I want to see the girls graduate, and then maybe open a clinic in a neighborhood where no one believes they deserve to be well taken care of." Leonardo nodded without irony. "Without a doubt, you're going to do it." And at that moment, Camila understood that she had overcome the most difficult fear of all. The fear of believing that she was capable of building something of her own, with her choices, her hands, her strength. The following Sunday, they decided to do something different. They took a bus to the city's historic center and spent the day as tourists, even though they had lived there their entire lives. Camila wanted to show the girls where she had studied as a child, and Leonardo told stories about when he was young, and would walk through those same streets without imagining that one day he would return with a family. They ate pies at an old diner, took pictures in front of historic buildings, and laughed at the poses they had made up. In the afternoon, they sat in a square and watched the city go by. It was as if, that day, they were gluing together pieces of a broken past into something new, strong, and beautiful. Lucia commented, with her mouth full of ice cream, that life was getting colorful again. Camila laughed, because that was exactly what it was, and she knew that if Mariana were there, she would laugh too, with that mocking and loving way that only she had. On the way home, the bus was more crowded than usual, and Leonardo stood, holding onto the top bar, while Camila and the girls sat down. At one point, a woman who was having difficulties got on, and Sophia immediately stood up to give up her seat. Camila smiled proudly, and the woman thanked her with such affection that she was moved. Small gestures like that were part of what Camila had always wanted to teach her girls: respect, empathy, sensitivity, and seeing that being experienced spontaneously was one of the greatest rewards she could receive. That night, before going to bed, Camila went through each room, adjusted the girls' blankets, and sat for a while in the hallway, just listening to the house breathing. The silence, which had once been synonymous with solitude, was now comfort. And at that moment, she understood. Starting over didn't mean going back to square one. It was building a new place with everything that life had left along the way. On Monday, Camila woke up before her alarm. It was still dark, but she didn't feel tired. She felt purposeful. She got up calmly, made coffee, set out the course materials, and left the girls' uniforms ready. When Leonardo appeared in the kitchen, half asleep, she was already ready. He asked, "Did you sleep well?" And she answered, better than I have in years. It was true. The weight of guilt, of solitary survival, of sleepless nights was slowly dissolving, giving way to something new. It wasn't just happiness, it was presence. It was knowing that, despite all the scars, she was alive and whole, and that made everything different. When she left the house, she held each girl's hand firmly, crossed the street attentively, and went about her day with her head held high. Because now, finally, she knew where she wanted to go. During the afternoon, while the girls were at school and Leonardo was taking care of the garden, Camila went to a stationery store and bought a new notebook. On the cover, she pasted a photo of the four of them, taken in the park a few Sundays before. It was supposed to be the beginning of a new diary, no longer about pain, but about achievements. He decided to record his daily victories, no matter how small they were. Writing, for her, was a way of not forgetting that each step had value. On the first page, he wrote, "Today I didn't doubt myself once." He read it aloud and smiled. It was a landmark, a reminder that her story was not just about losses, but also about overcoming, rebuilding, and unexpected affections. On the way home, he smelled the beans on the fire and heard Lucia singing out of tune in her room. Camila smiled to herself, because there, in that simple and truthful everyday life, she had rediscovered what she never thought she would feel again: peace. One Saturday, months later, Camila ran into an old acquaintance at the market. She was a schoolmate, one of those people who life separates over time. They talked for a few minutes, exchanged updates, and at one point the woman said, "You look different, you know, stronger, more whole." Camila smiled and thanked her without going into details. She didn't need to explain. The change was there, visible in her gestures, her look, her posture. Later she told Leonardo about the meeting, who replied, "It's just that now you're exactly where you should be." And for the first time, Camila didn't feel that twinge of doubt that had always accompanied her. She felt a sense of belonging, that kind of feeling that doesn't depend on the place or the people around her, but on the relationship she builds with her own story. And hers, with all its ups and downs, now made sense, not because it was perfect, but because she lived it with courage. That same night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Camila returned to the balcony with a mug of hot tea in her hands. He sat on the step, looking up at the sky leisurely, and stood there in silence for a long time. He thought about Mariana, as he almost always did, but without sadness. He thought about everything he had experienced, everything he had overcome, everything he had built with his own hands, and the encounters that life had unexpectedly brought him. And there, under an ordinary sky, in an ordinary house, surrounded by real love, she smiled, because I knew deep down in my chest that there was still a lot to come. But now she was no longer afraid, because where before there was only pain, now there was a path. And where before there was only survival, now there was life. And that was what mattered: living with truth, with affection, with purpose. On the day of the end of the course, Camila went up to the simple stage set up in the school's courtyard with trembling hands but a firm gaze. She received her certificate to applause from the audience, and in the background she saw Leonardo holding a sign made by the girls. "Our true heroine." She laughed, a shy laugh, full of emotion. The principal invited her to say a few words. Camila took a deep breath, adjusted the microphone and spoke, without rehearsing. "Not everyone chooses the life they lead, but we can choose what to do with it. I chose to continue." She received a standing ovation. After that day, Camila did not become a celebrity, nor did she make the cover of a magazine, but she became a reference. In her neighborhood, in the hospital, at home, and above all for herself. The girl who once thought she could not do it was now the woman who showed, with gestures, that it is possible. And so, between a coffee on the porch and a new drawing on the fridge, between notes left in the lunchbox and long hugs after long days, Camila kept on living. Not as someone who runs away from the past, but as someone who honors every part of it. Mariana's absence never stopped being felt, but it was also never just pain. It became a seed, the seed of a family rebuilt with courage, with choice, with truth. Leonardo, the girls and her, together, not by chance, but by decision. And even though there were still difficult days, now there was shared strength, there was purpose, there was love, a love without glamour but full of presence. And in the end, that was what sustained everything, the certainty that after a fall it is still possible to get up and move on. Because what defines a story is not what was taken from you, but what you built from it. If this story moved you, share it with someone special. Who knows, it might also help rebuild other paths out there.